Soldiers led by Omar Hassan Ahmed al-Bashir seized power in the Sudan in June 1989. Sweeping away a democratically elected government, the new Islamic regime promised a revolution of national salvation. What they have delivered is a human rights disaster and an Islamic state of fear. Caught up in a long-running guerrilla war, the Sudan has turned to Islam. On the battlefront with their African Christian south, they've seen success after success in recent years. This is their attack on the SPLA rebel headquarters at Torit. It fell to the Muslim troops from Khartoum. On the streets of the Sudanese capital, there was more than a government-arranged celebration. They were rejoicing at what they see as a victory over not only the SPLA rebels, but also a victory over the West. The international community feeds around 2 million southern Sudanese a year, but has been powerless to protect them from each other or the advancing Muslim forces. At a hospital near Congo in the south, tribal and government attacks have killed the doctors. Most of the 150 patients have died. Little aid reaches here, with government forces controlling more and more of the traditional aid routes.
The breast has been shot and the child is still alive. He is now in need of food or in treatment. And we have nothing in our hand, as I have shown you in our clinic. It's another man whose figures has been missing. Many parts of his bodies are cut.
With an emphasis on things military, radical Islamic propaganda, and open borders to all Muslims, Torobi has quietly turned the Sudan into the latest hotbed of Islamic radicalism. Despite Torobi's ambitions for an international Islamic democracy, his regime is accused of gross human rights abuses. In prisons and secret detention centers, political opponents are routinely beaten and tortured. Many arrive here in Koba prison after torture by the security department. With few government controls, many will be forgotten until a presidential amnesty is announced, as on this occasion, when 28 political prisoners are being released. Hundreds of political opponents are arrested each year. Most are held uncharged and untried in secret detention centers like this one. Detainees released from these so-called ghost houses have described systematic torture. Since the beginning of the revolution, there has been a lot of talk about torture, talk about people having their nails extracted, and electric shocks. Those people detained are now free in the streets inside and outside Sudan. If fingernails were extracted or bodies burned, the evidence would all be there. Check that for yourself. It's all lies. There are no such things as ghost houses or torture.
They put us inside a room, each area about 4 square meters. They put us there. They started to hit us, to lash us. They poured cold water on us for more than 20 days. They started to hang us from the roof until we get fainted. Then they pour on us cold water. They started again these silly games of torture. They threaten us that we are going to kill you unless you cooperate with us.
We have been concerned about human rights violations by the Sudan government since its inception 5 years ago, and we remain deeply concerned about the human rights situation here today. The human rights record of this regime is one of the principal causes of the poor relations between Sudan and the United States.
What Sudan's government says its position is on human rights and what actually occurs are two separate things. The agenda is total power through the Quran, and there's little real concern for human rights at any level. The people who especially don't want Sharia are the 1.8 million mostly Christian displaced who live around Khartoum. They fled the war in the south and have lived here for sometimes 20 years. But for the last 2 years, the Sudanese Ministry of Housing has been quietly demolishing their homes. They say their land belongs to others. This is a UN water system. It's part of a $2 million water project installed in a suburb which was then bulldozed. Despite international protests, the Sudanese government has plans for 1 million more demolitions. They're destroying a complex infrastructure built up over decades. This is Had Yusuf, and the bulldozers were here just hours before. The people were given little notice, and many possessions were buried. 250,000 houses have been demolished in this manner since 1992. After their homes are destroyed, this is where the government has put hundreds of thousands of the southern displaced. Foreign aid organizations are rarely allowed to work in these camps, and people are more vulnerable than ever. In districts like Had Yusuf, the government was unable to control and contain their Christian populations. By relocating them into refugee camps far outside the city, they're seen as less of a threat. Had Yusuf suburb from the air. The strip across the middle of the picture clearly shows the scale of destruction. When they're finished, the government will have demolished the entire suburb.
Before they come, they tell the public, the commissioner, the committee of the public to inform the people by the microphone in the area that tomorrow they are going to come and destroy the house.
The Ministry of Housing claims the land was squatted by illegal tenants. The fact of the matter is that hundreds of thousands are going through a nightmare while everyone looks away.
The United Nations at the time decided to put a protest in to the government of Sudan and asked them that we would like to have a observer status on any other relocations. And the government agreed to future monitoring of these relocations. However, the massive scale of the demolitions was too large for us to monitor every movement.
Sam, the man interviewed earlier at the demolitions of Had Yusuf, has been approached by Sudanese security. They want to know what he said to the journalists. Forced to flee for the interview Sam gave, he now disappears into the southern underground in Khartoum. Sam makes clear the risk he'd taken in speaking to journalists about the situation.
I have feared that to be catching and taken to prison, or to be taken to somewhere else, maybe to be hung, or maybe to be I can tell you there is many things happen like that. People taken, but nobody knows their place. And I'm afraid to be taken to place where nobody knows. Yes. And this is the thing that led me to be hide myself.
An X marks a house for demolition. It means that sometime soon, men will come with a bulldozer, police will come, and your home will be knocked down. And there's nothing anyone can do about it. In the new government camps, the situation is critical. Only Sudanese aid organizations are permitted in, and increasingly, the displaced are going hungry. We have nothing. We have nothing to eat.
The situation in the past has been that people haven't received enough food due to some of the policies related to the government and to United Nations and to the NGOs. There's been a problem with who receives the food, who distributes it, how it's distributed. The situation in terms of sustainability for the people, they can't normally find jobs because the areas where they're placed are far from the city center.
With only Sudanese charities allowed into the camps, the government is more free than ever to implement controversial Islamization policies. There are accusations that the government is operating a program of forced conversion to Islam.